I'm Paul Viguerie. I work for Altisource, Vice President of Business Development here. And Mike Jasta is our Chief Marketing Officer at Altisource, and Max Chera, Managing Partner with Express Capital Financing. So we have a really interesting topic today. It's CWCOT. And so Altisource, Hubzu, and Express Capital are joining forces to discuss CWCOT and hopefully do a deeper dive. So this is not a confusing conversation or subject. And specifically, I work out of Hubzu, which is our auction marketplace at Altisource, and Hubzu has been around since 2009. Thank you, Mike. I like the shirt. We were the first internet-based auction platform to sell real estate, and it's been wildly successful. We have, at this stage, 2.3 million registered users on our platform. So you can see that it's been embraced by the buying community. And we've sold, I believe it's north, and it changes daily, but we're pushing 250,000 homes at this point that we've sold through the platform. So hundreds of thousands of homes, and we sell homes quickly, and I think that the buyers are pleased with the platform as well as the sellers. So we have a great deal of liquidity. CWCOT is one of the types of properties that we sell. As I was talking to Mike earlier today, I believe it's about a quarter of our inventory today is CWCOT. So just a little background in a default life cycle, CWCOT is one of the first properties that we start seeing come through our pipeline. And so today we're going to talk about HUD's CWCOT program. What is it? FHA loans, foreclosure starts for Q1 of 2023. What were they? There's first and second chance CWCOT. We'll dive into that, what a 30-day exclusion is, how to find these properties at auction, gaining occupancy, and fix and flip or rent. These are great properties for both. So, what makes the most sense? So with that said, Mike, maybe turn the page, and I'm going to turn this over to Mike.
All right, so I put on every one of these slides what CWCOT stands for, because it's one of those acronyms that's kind of hard to remember, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense without the context too. It's a HUD program. I believe it was started in 1987, but the idea was, as part of these FHA loans, how first-time home buyers can buy a home with a low interest rate, but also a low down payment, as low as 3.5%. And it opens up that American dream of home ownership for a lot more people, right? But when those loans go bad, HUD has a insurance policy that's tied to these properties, and that's where the word claim comes from, because it's an insurance claim. And then the other WCOT stands for without conveyance of title. And so what happens is like, if you think about the liquidity in the marketplace, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they really deliver liquidity to the U.S. home buying public. And so a bank, like, let's say, Wells Fargo, you go in and you get a mortgage, you're going to buy a house, and you go to one of these standard mortgage companies, not an investor type loan like we're working with Express Capital Financing, but you get your mortgage for, what is it, 6.7% today or whatever, and you put your down payment down, and then Fannie Mae buys that loan from Wells Fargo and gives them their money back, and so they can loan to somebody else, and Freddie Mac does that as well. But for home buyers that are lower income or don't have that bigger down payments, HUD insures those loans and says, okay, this person has a FICO of at least 580, we'll give them 3.5% down. There's mortgage insurance that's required, and so they have to pay that extra mortgage insurance amount if it's less than the 20% down payment. But you wouldn't be doing an FHA loan if you had the 20%. You do a conventional mortgage, right? The debt to income ratio has to be less than 43%. I'm sure they picked that number from some research. I don't know why the oddly pick number of 43 versus 40 or 45. It has to be a primary residence. It can't be, a vacation property or an investment property. And then you have to prove employment and income. And if you meet these requirements, a mortgage lender can give you an FHA loan, and HUD will insure it. The U.S. government will ensure, that mortgage is a legitimate mortgage. And if it goes bad, HUD's either going to own it or they're going to pay that insurance claim on it. And the idea is that with CWCOT is that ultimately the U.S. government doesn't want to foreclose on the American dream, right? To put it bluntly. And so this claim without conveyance of title is the program that they put together for these lenders that say, okay, this loan's gone bad. Here's the waterfall of remediation that you have to do to try and turn it back into a re-performing loan. And if that doesn't work, here's the rules you have to do as it's going into a foreclosure sale out on the courthouse steps of America. And if that doesn't work, here's what you have to do post-foreclosure to try and sell that property, preferably to another family. And if not to another family, then to an investor of some sort who's going to either sell it back into the marketplace and kind of, fix that problem that happened without the government taking title to the property. Ultimately, people have heard of HUD homes. Those are the homes that eventually conveyed over the title to HUD, and then HUD goes and sells those. I think it's HUDhomes.gov or something like that. That's a great resource for properties that are actually vacant and that you can buy to move into, or if they've been there 30 days, you can buy those as fix and flip or rental properties as well. And Express can finance on those right away. So that's a good source to go look for homes too.
So Mike,
yeah, jump in.
On that last bullet point, CWCOT, and I'd say this for the audience benefit here, but just elaborate, like the program begins at a foreclosure, start right there and just kind of dial in why that is the case.
Sure. So when the loan becomes delinquent, right, after 60 days being delinquent, 2 months not being paid, you'll get an NOD, right? A notice of delinquency that's going to come from the servicer, whoever's sending the statement. So in that last scenario, Wells Fargo is saying, hey, you haven't paid us in 2 months. You're going to pay us, right? And in most states, within 30 days after that, they can send you what's called a notice of sale. It varies from state to state. I think Arizona is 120 days. California is 30 days. I think New Jersey is 30 days, even though the foreclosure process can take forever there. But when the property goes into default, that's when CWCOT kicks in, and where I mentioned that waterfall, where they're going to reach out to someone and try and get them on a payment plan. That's where the forbearance program came into play during COVID. And the idea is like, hey, let's get this. Maybe we can do a refinance the loan and make it a lot of these mortgages now are going from 30 to 40-year terms. And if they can perform the loan, that's the ultimate goal, to do that. But if it's not going to work, they have to follow these guidelines. And it's when the property is in default and the mortgage isn't being paid as they take it towards the foreclosure sale. And so that's really where, there's a potential claim against the insurance policy that HUD put on that mortgage when it was originated. And when it becomes delinquent, that's when CWCOT kicks in.
Thank you.
So all of this really leads to, foreclosure starts when we think about real estate investing. And I think the majority of people that are going to be looking at this are looking at this as a way to, acquire properties that they can either turn into flips or they can turn into rental properties, right? And the foreclosure starts have just been way down the past couple of years. And I mean, it was non-existent in the end of 2020 and most of 2021. There was zero foreclosure sales, because there was a federal foreclosure moratorium, and there's an eviction moratorium as well, and for good reason. It actually, the forbearance program was hugely successful, and that started with Trump and continued with Biden. But and both administrations, like I think 85–90% of those people came out of forbearance and they were reperforming. And so it gave people a pause while there was, everyone was at home and businesses were closed and people weren't paying those mortgages. And 85–90% of people came out of there with no problems at all. And we started to see last year foreclosures come back. I think it was about 60% of pre-pandemic foreclosure starts in 2022. And in 2023, we're estimating that will go up an additional 25%. And so bring it to about, by the end of this year, we should be about 82 to 83%. This is just an estimate I have of pre-pandemic foreclosure rates. And so a lot of that is going to be HUD CWCOT properties. And unfortunately, the reason is that these are usually lower value homes. So it would be anywhere from the 50 or 60,000 in some places in the Midwest up to 300 or 400,000. And it's because in some of these markets, if the home values went up 25% or 30%, like they did across the country, right? That's not a lot of dollars, right? And so if you were affected by COVID or this recession that we're entering into right now, and maybe you bought the house when the prices were at their highest last year, about a year ago, and you used a program like this, you might find yourself underwater. And it's going to be some of the lower income and lower value properties, because that percentage of property value growth just isn't enough dollar value to make it kind of a not underwater situation. Like I live in Austin, Texas, and if your $400,000 house went up to 800,000 during the pandemic, and then you lose your job, it doesn't go back to 400,000. You have whatever your equity was at the 400,000 plus an extra 400,000, and if it goes back 50, and you're going to lose your house, you're just going to sell it and take the money and rent for a while until you can get back on your feet and have a bunch of cash in the bank. But if you're in Cleveland Heights, like on the west side of Cleveland, and your house went up from value from 60,000 to 75,000 or 78,000, you might not be in that same situation where you can sell it, and after all your closing costs and agent fees and things, have any money in the bank. If you're in the same scenario. And so a lot of those properties would be CWCOT properties that would be heading into foreclosure. So we're going to see a lot of volume come back to the foreclosure sale. And in turn, the properties that don't sell there will turn into the bank-owned REO properties that are going to be in the online auctions that we have on Hubzu. So this is a good sign for investors.
Just to ask, wouldn't you say that there would still be some of those properties, let's say from the Austin market, that would still hit CWCOT? For example, you bought that property at the peak of 800K and now it's only worth 700, but you have to move for whatever reason and you just can't afford to sell at that point.
Yeah, and there's probably at 800,000, it's probably above the limit
past
for
FHA, right? I guess
FHA loan. But there's lots of $425,000 houses in the Austin area that exactly what you're saying, that if it claws back, 15% and you had 3.5% down on it, and now you're underwater. Basically, you put 3.5, $15,000 down on that house, let's say, it goes back, 15%, not the 3.5% you put down, you're going to be underwater by 30 or 40 grand. You can't sell that house and walk away from it. You're going to have to do a short sale, or it's going to go into foreclosure. And if the market isn't there, with the liquidity to buy that as a short sale, then it will go to foreclosure and it'll be out on the courthouse steps. In Texas, that'll be the first Tuesday of every month. So same thing in Georgia, or in the judicial states, they'll go to the sheriff's sale like they have in New Jersey.
Thank you.
So speaking about the foreclosure sale as we have, we mentioned in the beginning, one of the topics, first chance versus second chance. And that first chance is the foreclosure sale. And a lot of investors think, oh, foreclosure is just a bank-owned property. But a foreclosure sale is actually the point where it either becomes a bank-owned property or sells to an investor primarily for cash. There's some states where you put a deposit down and the court confirms the sale, and then 30 days later you pay the remainder. New Jersey has some different counties that you put 10% down or 20% down. It's mostly 20%. And then after 30 days, the judge will confirm the sale, and then you pay the other 80%. You got to do that in, I don't know, I think 48 hours or something like that. But in California, when you go onto the courthouse steps, or in Texas, or in Washington, you have to have the money in full. So if that's a $600,000 property or $400,000 property, you have to have the actual cash, in a cashier's check or money order. And in some cases, you can actually pay in cash. They have to accept it and then run to the bank, so they don't get jumped. I heard about a guy that a referee that does a sale up in New York that he got paid in cash, and then out in the parking lot he got robbed, and the money just disappeared.
Oh, man.
And so, they can choose to take the cash or not, I think, in New York, and just say, yeah, that's not, you need to give me a cashier's check. I think it's 10%. It wasn't like the full amount. But the first chance is that foreclosure sale, and the second chance is after the foreclosure sale. And with the HUD property, there's a special HUD appraiser or a HUD employee. It's either one of their assigned appraisers or an employee that has to do that, what's called the CAFMV, the Commissioner's Adjusted Fair Market Value for that property. And that determines what HUD wants for that property before they pay their insurance premium, their policy on it, right? If HUD is eventually going to own it, they're determining what it's going to sell for out on the courthouse steps. So if a property has a mortgage of 400 grand or 300 grand, and HUD determines that the current value of that property is 200, after their selling fees and things, they might set that value at $212,000, and that will be what's called the credit bid at the foreclosure sale. But ultimately, it's the same thing as a reserve, right? And so at the courthouse steps, if you don't hit that credit bid of $212,500 or whatever they set it at, it won't sell. It'll revert to the beneficiary, which means it goes to second chance CWCOT, and those are the ones that we see on Hubzu and the online auctions. And we'll show you, how you can look for those on the Hubzu site. But so the first chance is at that $212,500, and ironically, the second chance, if it doesn't sell, they don't lower the price when it goes in the online auction. That is the set reserve, and it cannot change. And in the online auction. And so ultimately you have to bid that, someone has to bid that to get that property, or it can actually just sit in an online auction in perpetuity. So if they get that number wrong, let's say the real value of that property is 200 grand and they want 212.5, but there's 30 or 40 grand worth of rehab due on it. It's never going to sell unless it goes up in value over time. I've seen some of these properties languish on online auction platforms for 2-3 years. Just because that value was set wrong and the market wasn't there to buy it. And unfortunately, the condition of it's getting worse and worse. So the repair numbers getting higher. And so trying to catch that number, even with the pandemic, some of those properties never actually got sold. And there's some of these kind of zombie properties that are out there.
So Mike, can that number ever change? What if an appraisal, or I'd love to hear more about ways that number may change, or is it going to really be a static for life?
It can actually. Last year they had, I think might have been 2021. They did come up with an option where if the property becomes vacant, like the person actually leaves the house or chooses to leave, because during this, they won't evict someone during the CWCOT process. An investor has to buy it and then actually, get the person out. We'll talk about that in a second. But if they, leave on their own volition and it becomes vacant, then, and it's within the first year, there's all sorts of guidelines here, but within the first year after the foreclosure sale, if the person vacates the property, the servicer can have a HUD appraiser come out and do a reappraisal now that it's vacant and get an interior appraisal. And that reserve can actually go up or down. So if it was at 212 and they go like, we thought this was going to look a lot worse on the inside when we did the initial appraisal, they might have actually raised the reserve. But as an investor, when you look at a house and you look at the outside and it looks like it's in crap condition, the inside's usually in crap condition too, like 99 times out of 100. But if you get there and it looks in crap condition on the outside and you go inside, it's like, oh, well, they really kept this place up on the inside. This place looks great. That's a number one, it's a surprise.
The problem is usually the opposite.
Exactly.
Looks nice on the outside, and then you walk in, you're like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. So those appraisals are usually set to like whatever it looks like on the outside, that's what they usually expect it to look like on the inside. And so usually, it'll either stay the same or go down in that scenario. But it's it's a half dozen, or what's that saying? There's two different options that can happen. It's either going to go up or down. So it's kind of a crapshoot.
Right.
But so that the second chance after that foreclosure sale, that's when it's kind of, I call it REO-ish, because it really isn't real estate owned. A real estate owned property is when a bank has a mortgage out and the bank now owns that same property. They don't own this property. Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae probably owns the paper on it, and then HUD is the ultimate beneficiary. And so the second chance is where it goes at least into an online auction, where you can bid online and say and watch that property over time. But like I mentioned before, the reserve is pretty much going to stay the same. When you have a bank-owned property, an actual REO, what will happen is it'll be an auction for a couple of weeks, and then the bank will lower the reserve. And they'll be in the auction for a month, and then they'll lower the reserve and say, okay, we did everything we could to kind of maximize our recovery on this mortgage, but ultimately we have to sell it. With these HUD properties, the reserve is going to stay the same. So if you see, we'll show you some screenshots of this in a second, but if it says REO or a CWCOT second chance, and you bid 200 grand and you don't get it, you can expect that number to be the same unless you get a notification from Hubzu that, hey, this property is now vacant. Oh, well, now the reserve might have actually changed. You might want to think about bidding on it again. But to go and bid on it 200,000 every time and hope for a different result, it's not going to happen with CWCOT. Just so you're aware of that. That's a good tip. Don't spend your time bidding on the same house. Go find a different one if the pricing doesn't work out. Unless that property becomes vacant. Or sometimes there's an opportunity where a servicer is actually kind of managing this property, for Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. It's insured by HUD, and they can contribute to that sale. So if we're saying, hey, we're only getting bids at 200,000, you need 212.5, and you're not getting it, they could say, we'll throw in the 12.5, and so HUD's whole at that point, because they want to stop managing that property and sending invoices out to it and having people drive by and look to make sure, like, the lawns cut, because you can have the HOA, go take a property to foreclosure on some of these things too. So there's certain management that a servicer has to do to track that property over time. And if it's sitting there for a year, it ends up being a lot of money. It'd be easier just to contribute the 12,500 than to kind of manage it and lose that money over the course of the year. Just cut bait and let it go.
Makes sense.
So. And then the 30-day inclusion, that's something that we mentioned in the topics at the beginning. After the foreclosure sale, and this was a memo that came out in May 2022, and I think it started in August of 2022. After the foreclosure sale on the courthouse steps, for the first 30 days, an investor can't buy it. So Hubzu, we have to market that property as an online auction, but for the first 30 days, the only people that can buy it is an owner-occupant, which is kind of unlikely because they're usually adversely occupied, right? So the last thing a family is going to do is go buy a house that's occupied that they can't see the inside of, that they have to pay in cash, and then kick another family out of it so they can move in, right? It's not a very likely scenario. I mean, I could see it happening every now and then, but not very often. And then
so is that happening? Is that happening on the first chance? So by the time it already hit second chance, it's open market?
It can't happen on the first chance because it's still owned by the homeowner, right? So it goes to the foreclosure sale, and then it either becomes this REO-ish property or it sells to an investor. So an investor can buy it at first chance without this 30-day exclusion. The 30-day exclusion happens if it doesn't sell at the foreclosure sale. For 30 days, only owner occupants, HUD-approved nonprofits. So there could be some organizations that are like Habitat for Humanity could buy it, right, in that first 30 days and rehab it, or a veterans group could buy it for, Wounded Warriors or something like that could buy that property in that first 30-day window. VFSAC, there's a couple, I'm sure there's hundreds of HUD-approved nonprofits that could buy those properties during that window, just like investors like you and me can't, or government entities. So a government-sponsored, group could buy this for affordable housing or something like that. or to turn into something else. Like, so like, you know, a local government could buy that house to tear it down and turn it into a community center or something like that. But we can't buy it and rehab it as an investor for that first 30 days. But Hubzu is required to market it in an online auction for 30 days. But we get a little more aggressive towards investors when that 30-day mark is hit, because we want to let investors know, hey, this property didn't sell in that window. Now it's open to everybody to go and place bids on.
That makes total sense.
All right. And so the big question is, how do you find it, right? So the foreclosure sales are actually harder to identify what's CWCOT and what's not, because even in the notice of sale, it doesn't say that HUD insured that property. It just shows who is servicing the property. And so you might not even know if Wells Fargo is servicing the property for Fannie Mae, you wouldn't know that it's even Fannie Mae has the paper, or that HUD insured it. And so, you know, we don't identify those on our site. I did select one that we can look at here in a few minutes and check it out. But so at the foreclosure sale, that first chance, they're pretty hard to identify. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter. Just like any property that's going to a foreclosure sale, there's going to be a credit bid, and 80% of these things postpone to a future date anyways. So if you're researching the CWCOT versus any other foreclosure property, you're going to do your due diligence, do your valuation on it. You're going to get your funds ready, and you're going to show up if it hasn't postponed prior to the foreclosure sale, and see if it goes to sale or if it didn't. And you can see actually on these, you can see it says cleared to sell on these. This was a screen grab I grabbed today. So some of these were probably in foreclosure sales today, and they were cleared to sell. So those actually did go to a foreclosure sale, either today or they'll go to tomorrow or something like that, on these three that are on the screen in Missouri, Mississippi, and Alabama. The more easily identifiable ones are the bank-owned properties. Before I get to those, I wanted to give the footprint of where we're marketing properties that are CWCOT across the country on Hubzu. But in some of these areas, we're actually marketing and conducting that foreclosure sale. So in these blue states, these are primarily non-judicial states. There are some judicial states like New Jersey and Ohio, where we have partnerships with people where we're actually conducting the sale. In Ohio, we can actually do the sales online on Hubzu.com, which is pretty cool, because it's something called a PSO, a private selling officer, I think is what it stands for. Where we can conduct those foreclosure sales online, and people around the country can actually bid on those properties in Ohio. But just about everywhere else, with the exception of Florida, you have to go out onto the courthouse steps and bid on those in person, or it's done in a courtroom. Like in New Jersey, a lot of the sheriff sales will happen inside the courtroom, in a meeting room there. And, you know, a representative of the court, usually the sheriff, is conducting that sale. But in our situation, we've partnered with a company that goes in and represents the attorney for the bank or the servicer. And so we're actually conducting that sale as Hubzu in New Jersey counties. And our person is doing what's called the upset bid. And they go in and there's a lot of details, you know, we won't dive too deep into it, but primarily in most counties, it starts at $100. And then an investor will say, 22,000, and then our auctioneer will be 22,100, 22,100, and someone will be like 24,000, and it'll get to a point where no investors are bidding, and it reverts to the beneficiary, or it exceeds what the bank's reserve is, and our representative sits down, and then it'll sell to that investor at that sheriff sale. But these green states are mostly judicial states, where we're marketing the property in Hubzu, so you can see it's going to the foreclosure sale. And the blue ones, we're actually conducting the sale as well. And eventually we're going to have proxy bidding to where you can go on and place a proxy bid online and then not have to actually attend, and we'll place that bid for you out on the courthouse steps and transfer your money over to the trustee or over to the attorney, depending on what the state is. So there's some interesting technology coming as volume returns to these foreclosure sales. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, it really is like, it's 1800s technology that's happening out on these courthouse steps, you know? They used to do these public sales where, hey, if you didn't pay your mortgage on that house to the local town bank, like they would put you in jail and they would auction your house and all the stuff in it, right? And they would go down to the house and they'd lay out everything. It's like, okay, and now we're going to sell the settee or whatever they called a couch back then, you know, and they'd auction that stuff off. I have some of those old auction posters actually from the 1800s. But so it's easier to find CWCOT in the online auctions at that second chance. And it's really as easy as going onto Hubzu and going up to this buy button here and selecting, you know, view all, and then filtering for CWCOT second chance. They're right there. And as Paul was saying, there was 1,014 properties, and when I hit this filter, it went to 283 of them being CWCOT. So that's about 28% of the properties on Hubzu right now that are in online auctions that are CWCOT. And I highlighted this in yellow so you can see what it would say on the screen there. This one had 20 minutes left on it when I took the screen grab on it. But yeah, they're all over the country. So that's the easiest way to find those on Hubzu. And once you, like we were saying at the very beginning, you know, you really can't finance these properties in advance because there's no interior inspection. You'll see some properties that actually are vacated, and what will happen is the servicer will hire a property preservation company. We have one at Altisource called Altisource Field Services, and they'll go out and they'll secure that property and board up the windows and change the door locks because they don't want people squatting in it, and cut the lawns and do those sorts of things as it's going into a foreclosure sale, or even at first chance or second chance as well. And those you can usually get an agent to get access to take you into those, but you have to have a licensed agent to do it. They just don't give access to anybody because they're insured, right? They have a bond so they can, you know, take you into those properties because there can be some significant like structural problems with some of them, you know? So you don't want to walk into a property and, you know, not fall down the stairs, but fall through the stairs, right? And so the bank doesn't want that kind of liability on the ones that are in really poor shape. But there will be some that are vacant, but the vast majority are going to be adversely occupied. Sometimes you'll knock on the door after you buy the property at the first chance sale and you get the deed, or you buy it at the second chance sale and you get your deed from the county recorder's office. You go and knock on the door and say, hey, you know, I bought this house, you got to go. And sometimes people are just like, oh, all right. I'll be out by Friday. You know, it happens, not a lot, right? And sometimes there's a person that was a tenant of the prior owner and says, I was paying that guy rent. You know, I stopped paying rent when I found I was getting foreclosed on. Can I rent it from you? I mean, if it's in decent enough shape and you have a tenant there already, that can turn into a really quick, like, you know, cash flowing property if you can work out a good rent based on what you paid for it. And that's something where Express Capital can come in and get your financing done on that right away because you have access to the interior. The tenant will let you in. But usually you're going to have to ask them to vacate, or you can do a cash for keys. My favorite strategy is like, hey, man, I know it's a crappy situation. I'll give you $3,000 if you can move out by next Saturday. And they go, oh, that's impossible. All right, well, I'm just going to have to call the sheriff and do an eviction then. No, I can make that happen, right? You know, that's right. The best scenario where you build that into your kind of purchase where you're helping them move, maybe even hire a truck and say, hey, I want to make sure the stuff actually gets out of the house. So I'll bring a truck. You just tell me what storage place you want to bring it to, you know. Well,
and a lot of the times just offering those dollars, like people are afraid of doing that. Like, oh, it's going to affect my well, no, it's affecting your cash flow now because you can't rent it today. You're already losing money on the property, you know? So yeah. Don't be afraid of that at all.
No, the age-old saying, time is money, and it's absolutely true in this case. And then, you know, eventually you're going to have to move to eviction as the process, and either hire a local attorney to help you send a scarier letter that will lead to a cash for keys or a vacate, while your parallel path is, you know, going to the sheriff and scheduling an eviction. And in some places that takes longer than others, right? So I mean, in New York and New Jersey, it can take a really long time to get through the eviction process, unless you have some ties there with the local government, obviously. But in North Carolina, it take 15 or 20 days, right? In some places it takes 30 days, and sometimes it takes 2 months, and sometimes it takes a really long time because the sheriff's busy. So ultimately, it's a terrible way to end up, but it unfortunately has to happen sometimes. You can't just live for free forever. So that occupancy is key, for getting the financing, because just like you and Max and the team at Express Capital, like you gotta see what's inside to know what the rehab budget's going to be, and we'll show you the rehab checklist that Express Capital put together too, because that's one of my favorite things they have. It's so detailed; they don't miss one step on there. And then Paul, you're going to talk a little bit about valuations, valuing those properties.
Sure. And as Mike was saying, many of the properties, or the vast majority of the properties, have someone living in them. And therefore, it's really important to be able to determine what the property's worth. And so many have already heard of Zillow estimates. Altisource has a data evaluation group called Nest Range. And it produces a very configurable and very accurate valuation, AVM. And Mike, maybe you can pull up the platform so we can kind of take a quick look.
I pulled up a CWCOT first chance property that's on Hubzu.
Yeah, that would be a great one to look at.
So this is in
so while Mike's pulling that up, this is a newer product at Altisource, Nest Range, and so, but it's going great for us. We're offering you can open an account right now on Nest Range and get some free credits to try the product out. If I'm on LinkedIn, you can also, my email is at the end of this webinar, but you can connect with me. I'd be happy to give you a demo of the product in a little more detail than we're going to do just in the next couple of minutes. But it does a few things really well. First, it offers a quick AVM, and that's always free of charge, and it's just a one-pager, but it does provide an estimated value and a confidence rating next to it. So that's useful as a quick glance. Oh,
sorry, I was trying to. I couldn't get to the tabs up here. Can you see my screen here with Nest Range?
I do see the screen with Nest Range. Can you get the property? Okay, so at the very bottom, real quickly before you go, this is what I was sharing. There's a quick AVM, an advanced valuation, and an interactive. The quick one is always free.
There it is, evaluation on the same property.
And there's the confidence score. You can see it's a 96% confidence score, which is really, really good.
And this is for free all the time. I mean, you just create an account, you can pull a valuation on any property, and it'll give you, what we believe on based on market comps.
As a broker, I pay $500 a year just to get that.
So and there's advanced valuations as well.
We have a report that we offered, and this is where we're going to assign free credits to try the product out, but it's far more detailed, and it even has trend data. And so Mike's looking at the report, and it does show
from the last listing when it was on the MLS. So these are pictures you wouldn't be able to see right now because it's not on the MLS. Market numbers, comps, the comps that we selected that are similar to this property in the area.
Yeah, and now these comps are pulled by the algorithms that support it, but it's very accurate. Now the confidence score didn't change; it did not change the valuation estimate, but it does provide a far more granular look at the property.
Right, and then ultimately,
here's the one that I believe is extremely relevant and interesting when you're evaluating these properties. This is the configurable one. You're able to choose your own comps and really make an assessment of what type of what's the condition of the subject property and what comps you'd like to use to evaluate it. And you'll get a different valuation every time if you're choosing your own comps.
So let's say I choose these and then I run the AVM.
And you can choose them with higher confidence scores, because each one of these will have a confidence score assigned, and so it can allow for an improved view.
You can see
This
the
is
value actually
phenomenal,
changed by
especially
$10,000 now.
Yeah. So
I was just gonna add in, this is phenomenal for those seasoned investors that really understand their market, because
Exactly.
I could see already that you could start to even sort your data from the top based off of the comp ranking, bedroom, bathroom, lot size, which is something that a lot of these local investors, right? They focus on one area. They understand that market. Oh, here square footage is king. Here it's nothing about that. It's about the bedroom, bathroom count. Here, you know what I mean? So just because and that confidence score of 96, I'm sure you're going to get real damn close to that actual value. But at the same time, if you're just understanding your market differently, you could start to manipulate this and get the actual clear data that you need to decide if this is a good opportunity or not for you.
Yeah, I think it lets you do 3 or 4 different, custom valuations on these reports. And I believe if you're just buying one report, I think it's $20 or something like that. But you can also add comps in here. If our computer didn't select them, you can just add an address too, and it'll pull that data for that property and help you calculate it. It's really for a little more advanced users that aren't like letting the big data choose the number for you. You can go to Zillow and get a Zestimate. Our AVM number is our version of that. We think it's a little more accurate. And actually we've done some market testings on 10 different valuations company, and we ranked like one of the second or third for most accuracy. So it's a brand new product that we have, and if anyone that's viewing this, even at any time, even if it's months from when this is being recorded, if you reach out to Paul or I, just create a free account on NestRange and we'll get you like 5 credits or something, so you can go in and run some reports.
yeah, and if you're the boots on the ground and you have expertise in your area, I think that becomes incredibly powerful. So
100%.
the AVMs are perhaps quite good at a peripheral level, but this is a good place to do research.
The ability to see it, because like we all know that this information is available online if I just do enough digging. But the ability to just bring it all to the forefront and now just be able to see it from this bird's eye view is where I see the most value. Because you could sit there and spend a couple hours on Zillow, find a deal that you found out is not a deal because of the value, and then you just wasted all the time. You're like, oh, well, I could have just saw it from here and found another deal that actually I can invest in. Time is money.
For sure.
And I think I flipped back here.
So again, feel free to connect with me on NestRange if you'd like.
And then one of the things I love about Express Capital on their website is this ultimate property walkthrough checklist. I took a screen grab of it here, but it's on the Express Capital site, and it just thinks up everything. I wish I could just share this one window.
Yeah, I was gonna say it should be under our business resources tab. There should be right there at the bottom. It just says property walkthrough checklist. If you want, I could probably share it. It looks like you actually have our page open.
So business resources, there's these great calculators right here, the fix and flip and the rental property calculator. These things are fantastic. And then there's the property walkthrough checklist. I use this calculator myself actually for fix and flip.
It's real great and simple. We're actually going to be modifying a little bit better, a little bit easier to use, just making some of like the dragging points more typable. But yeah, anything you need to do here, it doesn't have to be specific to Express Capital Financing's terms, right? Because you could enter all the information based on your deal, right? Whatever you're expecting your time to flip, whatever your LTVs that you're kind of accounting for, points, rates, you can adjust all of that from here and see what that would actually look like. Now, keep in mind, as to get the most accurate number, you have to do a little bit of digging, understand your market, what taxes are like. Does your state charge mortgage taxes? Does it not? That's where it'll help you out there. And then like Mike pulled up over here, you also have the rental property calculator, which this one is really, it'll give you all the information you need to know, your cash on cash return, your ROI, your internal rate of return, And you could really just look at it from there and see if it makes sense for you or not. What's my cash flow going to be? What would a rainy day look like, right? So utilize these tools for those of you who don't already know what that should look like, or maybe you just want to refresh your memory and see if there's a data point that you missed that would be important to know about when you are running your numbers.
And then we were talking about occupancy earlier. I pulled this up just because I wanted to show you guys how comprehensive this is. It just thinks about everything, like window panes, screens. You know, you walk through a house and don't realize that it's missing 4 screens. Well, that's like $250, you know, like it's all these things add up, right? You know, but when you have this checklist and you can make your notes on it, like I just love the fact that, because you'll forget something, you'll walk through and you'll take some pictures, and you know, maybe you'll go home and be like, oh, I didn't even see that. Now I'm looking at the picture, but this makes sure you don't forget anything. Look, like ceiling fans and circuit breakers and doorbells. You know, oh, did I try the door? That thing doesn't work. Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewire this thing.
Those are things that people usually miss, and then they have to go through a property inspection, and then the inspector comes and he's like, well, you know, your outlet's not working, or, well, you know, your doorbell's not working, and they notate that. And
right.
Does it change things that drastically? Like, the property's still functional? Like, yeah, if your doorbell's broken, it's usually an easy fix, but it's more just the fact that you have a much cleaner report when you have that buyer coming in and they're buying it from you, right? As a real estate broker, the last thing I wanted was a really long inspection report, because then I know they're going to ask me for the world in credits, and we don't want to do that, right? So the more you just tighten that up and the less they have to talk about or bring up to you, the easier your deal will go through, and the more confidence they're going to have also in your property and the way that you fix it up.
Yeah, this is a great checklist. All right, so now I got to put back the other one.
And while Mike's doing that, it's a great idea to have a lending partner that does understand CWCOT and what it is and what you're dealing with. And so I think that is one benefit for Express Capital Financing, is that they're familiar.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And we take the time really to speak with professionals like yourself in your field to understand these programs better. I'm sure there is a lot of information that I learned today that I didn't know before. So I appreciate all that from you guys. But just to kind of touch a little bit on the financing portion of this, because we didn't really bring that up too much. There are ways that you could finance these right away once you have title of the property, and there are ways to finance CWCOT at a later point, right? And the biggest thing comes down to, number one, is what is my plan with the property? What am I doing? Am I holding this? Am I going to flip it? And the next thing we need to keep in mind is, do we have a tenant in place, right? Because probably 99 to 100% of the time when you buy a CWCOT property, you're gonna have to take title before we start before we start the financing process. So if we're doing a fix and flip, those are actually going to be the easiest, because we understand the property is not going to be in great condition. We're going to use your purchase price as the purchase. We could probably even at that point, since you've put up all that money, we'll be able to leverage your purchase, and won't have to bring anything to the closing. You'll probably get some money back even, which you could use towards your next investment. We'll give you the rehab funds so that you can complete the property. And then you'll be able to, like we said, start already using the money that you got back to negotiate the next one and keep your pipeline moving in that cycle, so that you always have a property being purchased, always have a property being worked on, and always have a property being sold at any given point. Now, the little bit trickier, or not even so tricky, there's just more options, is if we're going to be holding on to that property, right? So now we've taken the asset and you were able to give the tenant, let's say they decided to become a tenant right away, or you give them cash for keys and now you've rented it out to a new tenant. You'll then have two options. So because you probably own that property for less than 6 months, you'll be able to finance it and get cash back based off of your purchase price. So let's just say you bought it for, we'll use a simple number of $100,000. You'll be able to get $75,000 back right away once you have a tenant in that property, right? And that's based off of us going to a maximum of 75 LTV on a cash out refinance. Now, the second option you would have is if you held that property for a little bit longer and you just let it cash flow for 6 months, and now you decided to refinance. And again, similar to like what Mike said earlier, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, depends on how the markets are doing. If that property increased in value, you will be able to get a higher cash out. So again, I know these numbers won't jump that high, but let's say you went from 100 to 200, now your cash out would be 150 because you're basing it off the as-is value as opposed to your purchase price. Now, if the property value goes down, it could also mean that you get a lower loan amount, and that's where you can decide what's best for you. Do I want to take what I can today, knowing that it's a fair amount based off of what I paid and I'm leveraging myself? Or do I feel like I can leverage this asset more, which is usually, it's a good way of thinking because it's going to help you accelerate your business well, but also you never want to over leverage yourself, right? As much as I am an advocate of taking on debt, always do it responsibly. Don't try to take on too much or try to over leverage your asset. You never want that. You always want to be able to keep yourself free, clear, be able to touch. If you have more equity in that property, power to you, it's always there for you. So those are usually the ways that we would go about financing them. Like we said, there are definitely options. Doesn't matter which way you end up going about it. You will be able to finance it with us. Unless you plan to live in the home, then you would have to speak with a traditional loan officer.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing I like about, these first chance properties in particular is that you're usually buying it, below market value when it sells at those foreclosure sales. And so when you're adding, your rehab in on your estimate, your after repaired value usually it's like a lot higher than what you kind of invested into it. So like in your $100,000 scenario, like you're not going to bid $150,000 on a property with a ARV of 150,000. You're going to bid 100,000 on it, knowing you're going to put 20 or 30 G's into rehabbing it. But then you have a house that's probably worth 150,000, and so when you go to your refinancing, you basically have your nut back that you can go and invest in another property. Like Max was saying. So it's not like your money is decreasing. It's usually staying the same or increasing from a cash flow perspective. As you're going and trying to get additional investments into your portfolio, whether you're flipping it or it's a rental property.
Yeah.
Great
and
point.
Like we were saying earlier before everything started, assets are king right now, right? Because especially with the way we just printed even more money, for the banks the other month or a couple weeks ago. And, again, it's going to catch up to us. We're going to see that. And that's normal. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's just understanding how to navigate that. Always, I would rather have, if the dollar goes down, it just means you're going to have to spend more money to get my asset. And if I bought it cheaper than you did at that time, well, I just have more equity in it now. Right. So keep that in mind, grow with the inflation, don't grow against it. Right. And just find better ways to leverage yourself and safely leverage yourself. Right. Don't just take on debt just to take it on. Make sure it makes sense. Make sure that the person you're working with has your best interest in mind, wants to grow with you and help that portfolio grow, because at the end of the day, that's how we all grow together.
Yeah, real estate's the best hedge in my mind. So.
Yep.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Right. Well, our contact details are on here. Again, if you want to take advantage of the Nest Range thing, just create a free account and either email Paul or I or LinkedIn with us, or send us a tweet or something, and we'll get you some credits in your account. And so you can try out those advanced AVMs as well. And like Paul said, though, the quick AVM is always free. All you got to do is create a free account, and you can just type in an address and quick AVM, and it'll give you that value on that one-page PDF. And that's a great place to start.
Yeah, and also that's true too for Hubzu. If you're interested in learning more about how to use Hubzu, I'm happy to help you with that and set you up as a registered user. Or if you have properties to sell, be happy to have that conversation. And so please feel free to reach out at any time.
100%. And guys, just remember, this was our third webinar of a 6th webinar series. So we still got a few more coming up, just to give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek. The next topic, we're going to be covering bridge loans and why hard money is actually so easy. And then we are going to have the following one, which is going to be deal day. the best investment properties on Hubzu today. So keep posted for that one, guys. It's coming soon. We'll put out the marketing material soon, so you guys will know when and where to be. And we look forward to seeing you guys again. You guys have made this really a pleasure. Been getting a lot of outreach from you guys. So I see that this is providing a whole lot of value, and we hope to keep bringing more to the table.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it, and look forward to speaking with you all soon if you'd like.
100%. See you guys later.